Hi Year 11s, Mrs Mason here. I'm here to talk to you about A-level PE. Okay, so course breakdown for A-level PE. The biggest weighting is the theory content. This will be taught over the 2 years by myself and Mr Smith, and you will be assessed for the theory in 2 exam papers. I'll go into a bit more detail later on in the presentation about those. Practical in comparison to GCSE is now just 1 sport, okay, and that's 15% weighting. And finally, you will be writing a piece of coursework on a practical sport of your choice, using the theory topics that you've learned in your theory lessons, and that is also worth 15%. Okay, so for A-level PE, you will sit 2 exam papers. Both papers are 2 hours long, and they are split up into 3 sections each of equal marks or points. Okay, so paper 1 is about the factors that affecting participation in physical activity and sport. I'm going to talk you through the 3 sections that are included in this paper. So the first section of paper 1 is anatomy and physiology. It consists of 5 units, 4 of which you have already studied at GCSE. So the first being the cardiovascular system. So we will look again at the different parts of the heart and their functions. You will look at how the heart beats. So the specialist muscle that sits within the middle of the heart that controls the rate at which it beats, and we'll do a heart dissection to look at that too. The respiratory system, so we'll look at gaseous exchange. We'll look at how smoking affects the lungs and the alveoli in particular. The musculoskeletal system, so bones and muscles. We'll look at movement analysis, so we'll look at squats, press-ups. We'll analyse the different movements that are occurring at each part of those actions. The neuromuscular system, so we look at muscles in more detail. So you look at the different types of muscle fibres that you're born with, and the benefits of having those muscle fibre types and which sports they're best suited to. And finally, energy systems, which is the new unit. We look at how the body creates its energy to exercise. So there's 3 energy systems that we go into great detail in, and we look at which sports each energy system provides energy for. The second unit in paper 1 is skill acquisition. Again, you would have learned the baseline information for this topic at GCSE. So in this unit, you're going to be studying the different processes involved in making effective decisions during sport. So for example, we'll look at different theories of arousal, theories of aggression, and how we learn to do new skills and what coaches can do to maximise progress. So for example, what is the best method for learning a complex tumbling routine in gymnastics? Or how does Steph Curry process the information around him in order to make effective decisions? So again, topics that you've already studied at GCSE, but in a bit more detail. And the final section of paper 1 is history of sport. This is a really interesting unit, actually, brand new to you, so you haven't studied this at GCSE. You're going to look back at the 19th century and look at the differences between the lower class and the upper class and how they lived. What sports they did in their free time, what sports did they begin to play in school, so where did PE begin, and in particular you'll study the development of football, tennis and athletics all the way back from the 19th century and how it's progressed or developed to present day. So at football, we'll look at mob football. It's a game that lower classes used to play just in their streets or villages, and how it developed through to association football today. Tennis began as a form of real tennis played by the upper classes in courts that look quite similar to squash courts, and we'll look at how it's developed from real tennis now to the tennis that we know at Wimbledon. And athletics. Athletics began as a sport called pedestrianism, in which the lower classes used to be servants or messengers to the upper classes, and they had to compete at how long and how fast they could run for. And then we'll look at athletics in its form today. So paper 2 has the same setup as paper 1 in that you'll study 3 different sections. It's a 2-hour exam. Each section has the same weighting. You're within that exam, there are multiple choice questions, shorter answer questions, and extended writing questions, just like GCSE. First unit in paper 2 is exercise physiology. So here you will look at the different training types, the principles of training that we learned at GCSE, but you'll also study some new topics such as biomechanical movements involved in different physical activities and skills. So, for example, you'll examine forces involved in bringing about movement, as well as methods which athletes use to optimise training, nutrition, and recovery from injury. So, for example, why is it so difficult to stop an international winger running at full speed for the try line? Or how does a trampolinist bring about enough rotation to perform their signature moves? So the second section of paper 2 is sports psychology. You'll look at mental processes in this unit that a performer must use in order to perform at their best. So how to keep calm in pressurised situations and how to maintain self-confidence after defeat. So how does a professional golfer restore confidence after missing an easy putt in a game? Or how do world-class performers perform under intense pressure, even on the biggest stage? For example, Andy Murray, how did he come back after losing at Wimbledon 2 years before and then went on to win? And the final topic in paper 2 is sport and society. So here we'll look at ethics in sport, a topic that you're familiar with from GCSE. So we'll look at violence in sport, hooliganism. We'll also look at player violence now. We'll look at the difference between sportsmanship and gamesmanship. And we'll look at drugs in sport, but we look a bit more closely at testing and what problems different countries face with drug testing. You'll also study commercialisation on sport, so the effect of commercialisation. So we'll look at sponsorship deals, we'll look at technology in sport, how officials use technology, how coaches are using it to improve their performers' games. We'll look at different concepts in physical activity, so we'll compare concepts such as sport, outdoor and adventurous activities. We'll look at physical recreation, physical education. And finally, you'll study the development of elite athletes in the UK. So how do we identify talent in the UK? And then what support systems are in place to help develop those athletes to become elite? So at A-level, the practical performance is now worth 15%. And it's slightly different to GCSE. You only have to choose one activity. Okay, it can be either a team or an individual activity. You have to perform in that activity, and the pressure will be on yourself to collate the video evidence of you performing in that activity outside of school. So we do advise that you are competing in one of these sports outside of school for A-level PE. Alongside your practical sport, you'll also be required to create a piece of coursework in which you analyse and evaluate a performance in one activity from a specification. This tends to be the sport that you've chosen to perform in. So you have to, for coursework, identify 2 weaknesses in your performance or someone else's performance. Then you're required to explain the cause or the causes of the weakness using theory topics you've learned in your theory lessons. You then need to produce an action plan that suggests ways to improve your weaknesses that you've identified. So finally, A-level PE can lead to a number of different careers. Okay, so if you wanted to study PE at university, it can lead on to sports studies degrees, sports coaching degrees, sports science degrees. If you wanted to go and do training outside of university, such as maybe a police officer or train to be a personal trainer. So there are lots of different routes which you can take that PE will help you or lead you into those routes.